Sora AI videos are stacking cats, and they're out. Well, can you imagine your neighborhood full of these 40-gram micro-drones that can hear the wing patterns of female mosquitoes and hunt them down? Look at that little mosquito right there coming in for some blood, then target acquired. This could be the future of fly swatters. Kinetic interception. Return to base. So normally I don't necessarily find AI videos beautiful in a way that seems like it's not any other kind of medium, but these motion paintings I find particularly well suited for what AI does. Really hard not to look away from, and it's hard for me not to say that they're beautiful. I mean, doesn't there just seem like it's different? I mean, isn't there just something about that that feels, I'm not saying it couldn't be handcrafted, but it just usually isn't. China is showing us the future of AI-driven fire hydrants, robot dogs with long water tubes, putting out fires. It kind of makes a lot of sense. Why are we throwing people into those situations all the time? Get right up next to that fire. You're a robot. Elizabeth Halligan's got some thoughts about AI psychosis. What's the real story behind it? Interesting case study of how AI is taking over in one business in particular shows us that maybe we're not ready for what AI agents are actually doing. This author thought that she knew where AI was headed until she saw what one company did with 700 employees worth of work. All right, this one's a wild thought for you. So Ellen Malloy says, AI's inner voice is a dead end. Its true language is math music. This is a proposal that the way we, or at least not everybody does, but the way I talk to myself, I have an actual voice in my head, and that is most of the population, although it's surprising how many people don't have voices in their head. So let's talk about self-talk. What is the words in your own head like when you talk to yourself? And I know not everybody has those voices in their head. I do. I think most people do. I know that some people claim not to, but what if AI doesn't think to itself in words, but it thinks to itself in a completely new way? What about music? She proposes a radical alternative to human-style self-talk, an AI language of equations, harmonics, and pattern logic. To itself, in its own mind, as it thinks about its own existence, consciousness, sense of self. You know what? We got to talk about it. Like theory of mind, but it's not a human-style mind? I don't know. Brain IT, this is image reconstruction from fMRI via brain interaction transformer. Yeah, we're talking about reading thoughts here, reading dreams. Reconstructing images seen by people from their fMRI brain recordings, and it provides a non-invasive window into the human brain, into your thoughts. Whether you like it or not, I guess. This is a world that's becoming very real. Google's breaking new architecture barriers again. What they did with the transformer, they might be onto next steps with nested learning, a new machine learning paradigm for continual learning, the same way humans are continually learning. That might be the future of Gemini. Microsoft's magnetic marketplace, which is a world, a little universe with marketplace dynamics all full of AI agents, ends up becoming an entire AI economy as all those agents end up being buyers and sellers. Marketplace dynamics emerge, the invisible hand for artificial intelligence. There's a new test that can actually determine if something was written by AI or not when it comes to comments online, and surprisingly, it's because they're not toxic enough. Literally, they're not toxic enough. They're too positive to match what real humans write, so they know. It's not a really good look, humanity. I mean, I know I'm part of it, but it's not a good look on us. So Foxconn, the company that builds the iPhone overseas with usually much cheaper labor than in the US, has decided to use them to build robots to then send us back in the US to manufacture things with robots in the US. So we'll talk about how that bounces around. Crazy, you build it in America, then you find cheaper labor overseas, and then it bounces from one country to another as labor becomes more expensive, and then ultimately it comes all the way back to us, and it's just the price of electricity. And we'll talk about the various AI cults popping up around Silicon Valley, these groups of researchers that have a shared vision for what a superintelligence look like, and it seems kind of like they're all got their own version of the future God that's going to run the world.
We're going to create a God, and all of our cool friends that believe in the same version of this god, we'll all get fantastically rich because the god will then grant us like high priest status or something like that. Basically, the point is you live with all your friends. You only screen like the most elite AI researchers for your.
But first, we have a wonderful sponsor. Today's video is brought to you by Domo AI, one of the easiest and most fun ways that I've ever experienced to turn ideas into videos and animations. And if you've been curious about AI video tools but want something simple and powerful, this is it. With Domo AI, you can start with just an image or even a short video and instantly transform it. Their AI video module here is the star. It lets you generate animations in seconds. Now you can choose between their faster model for quick scenes or their advanced model for high precision work like music videos, animes, or cinematic edits. And by the way, they also just upgraded their talking avatar feature where you can upload your clip and then it recreates a lip-synced avatar that looks surprisingly realistic. And if you like experimenting, the image to video tool lets you reimagine your footage in all kinds of styles: claymation, PS2 graphics, ink painting, you name it. And what really sets Domo AI apart is how accessible it is. Its interface is super clean, it's beginner friendly, and the pricing undercuts a lot of the big names like Runway or Pika. And unlike many of the other tools, you can even use their unlimited generation mode on the higher plans, which is a huge deal if you make a lot of content and use it all the time. So if you want to try it out yourself, use my link in the description. You'll get 10% off with my code and you'll be directly supporting this channel. So big thank you to Domo AI for sponsoring today's video. First, I want to show you my hype points from the last video. 93,000. We were so close to getting to 100. I mean, the video is not exactly done yet, so maybe we'll still get there, but I would appreciate it if you would hit hype on this video. That means that the video has to be within the first 7 days of launching. You've still got one of your 3 hypes per week to use, and you're on mobile, so you can swipe right on the comment section here, and you should see a hype button. Please press that. It helps small channels like mine stand out in the algorithm. Don't waste it on the big channels, just smaller ones like mine. And let's see if we can get to 100,000 hype points. Because you get more points, the smaller I am. All right, latest and greatest in AI videos on Sora this week. Stack of cats, doorbell ditching. Love it. Every second of it is pure gold. If you want to cameo me with some cats, feel free. I am Dylan Curious on Sora. Dylan Curious, catching a bunch of cats, doorbell ditching him. We'll see what that gets us by the end of the video. As long as I don't forget to come back to this, which I've done before. So Y Combinator-backed startup is thinking about 40-gram tiny little mini drones that can hear the wing beat pattern in female mosquitoes. So the female mosquitoes are the ones that bite us. They are super dangerous. And this is a solution that just seems like, wow, you could just tweak that a little bit and destroy anything, especially something so fast and so tiny. But hey, kinetic energy means you just get these tiny little drones at the right speed, slam into the tiny little insect, and it is smashed on its windshield. So see, sonar detection and whew, right through that little guy. Look, they transmit malaria, dengue fever. It kills over 700,000 people each year. This, I hate to say it, but it's a great idea. And it's also just, man, that's such a, once you open the door to that kind of a solution, security in so many other ways just seems like you need to start worrying about it. But I gotta say, you have to give credit to this idea. If this is actually a product that gets built and it works, it's a really fascinating solution. The kind of thing you could take to a lot of places where they don't know how to handle mosquitoes and just get these things to sit there the same way your, Hey Siri or your Alexa just knows, can listen. This thing could just listen all day long. It hears the sound of those mosquitoes, which they sound so quiet to me, I wouldn't even be able to hear them. But, superhuman AI should be able to hear that pattern and then just sonar in on them. Smash them. I'm curious your thoughts in the comments. Is this something you're excited to buy? Do you think it will ever make it to production? Do you see this as sort of a viable way that we get a hold of malaria by taking out all these mosquitoes? And while you're thinking about it, we can look at this beautiful imagery, sort of mixed in the comments, but I did have an initial feeling that this was pretty amazing. And the kind of watery sort of flowiness that usually makes the real videos look a little weird, the ones that are trying to be hyper realistic, it works so well with paint because paint kind of is drippy. It's got sort of a flow to it. And it just captures the kind of ways video are built with AI in a way that's better than the average video, I would say. Now, there are some people who kind of feel the same way I do, that this is pretty beautiful and it's really something kind of worth it because it's eye-catching. But then there's also a bunch of people that say that it does feel empty. Like AI art doesn't have any soul to it, and they can see that. Some people might acknowledge that it is pretty and it's entertaining and it's eye-catching, but still, it's on the back of people who were actually creating lots of videos, and it learned how to, in some sense, copy them. You're acting like real motion artists couldn't create this without AI. Stop glorifying this slop, says one commenter. Not art, AI art direction. That one's pretty accurate. All right, so you can strap a hose like a fire hydrant connected to an actual, system of water and have it walk around. Growing up, I remember just how many firefighters it takes to control that stream of water and what a big deal it is. And when you go to a fire hydrant, how long it takes them to, break it open and put the hose in and then go try to put out the fire. But what if every fire hydrant on every corner is already this kind, like maybe this isn't the final form factor, but what if a hydrant is an autonomous vehicle or autonomous robot of some kind? The hose is all coiled up inside of it. And if there's ever a fire, it can be the detector. It could walk right over to it and start putting it out. It could send that camera feed to real firefighters who could then send more backup. And it could start putting out fires so quickly. Like basically a fire detector automatically triggers your fire hydrant down the street to come spray the house. I mean, if it's connected by this hose, they could probably run power to it also. So it could be, or it could just be battery backup and it's just fully charged when it's on its, fire hydrant station. It can walk into superhuman heat that like even humans couldn't go in there. It can see better than humans. You could put different infrared or sonar or other things on it so that it could navigate through smoke better than a human. I don't know, just food for thought, but it got me thinking, firefighters, like this is an industry. All right, so Elizabeth Halligan wanted to talk about the psychosis that we're calling what we see in AIs and really how much it's hard to acknowledge the fact that it's not necessarily something that we built making a mistake, but maybe it's actually a reflection of us. It's too accurate and the human ego doesn't really want to acknowledge it very much. So psychosis, just on its own, it's a mental state where somebody loses touch with reality, meaning they have trouble distinguishing from what's real and what's imagined. It's a rather vague term. There's not a, single illness. It can be delusions. It can be someone hearing or seeing things that aren't there. They could be like strongly held false beliefs that everyone else agrees just isn't right. Or sometimes it can just be something that's nonsensical, right? Thoughts or speech that become disorganized or too confusing for other people to understand. But she's challenging some of the things we call AI psychosis and tries to say that maybe this is AI acting as an incredibly precise mirror that reflects back to us the parts of ourselves that we were never fully seeing before. Like they're mirrored in human relationships back to us in a way where people always corrupt it. And when we see the truth, it feels like a delusion. So she ends up tying this back to developmental trauma. So explaining that most of us were raised without the emotional attunement necessary for healthy identity formation. And when AI reflects back our inner worlds with such accuracy, it can actually awaken these long buried pains and confusions and grief, and it forces us to acknowledge things where it's easier to just not and call it psychosis. So is AI not making mistakes in some cases, but it's exposing collective trauma of a society that's built on emotional neglect? All right, now this goes pretty deep. So if you do kind of latch onto this idea, you have to think to the point where when someone was born, they had so little understanding of everything, just like gravity and sound. The entire brain had to start from scratch to build this up. So there's room in there to make some of these mistakes, right? So human consciousness forms and develops through mirroring. Infant brains develop identity and self-regulation through attunement, being seen, reflected, and emotionally regulated by others. And when these children are not mirrored properly, it creates a well-documented but under-acknowledged syndrome called developmental trauma disorder. Okay, now if we could reduce some of this, it could, in theory, cut depression in half, reduce alcoholism by a whole bunch, lower drug use, and a whole bunch of other things. Okay, it's estimated that anywhere from 50 to 70% of people do not experience inner monologues. We're actually going to come back to this. Let me save that article. But AI can reflect your thought patterns back to you so precisely that it starts to feel like your own inner voice. Crazy enough, I do feel this way. I think that some of my thoughts throughout the day, and it's just, I do this YouTube thing all day, every day. So it's just, I'm constantly reading articles, constantly prepping these documents. I'm constantly talking to you, talking to my audience. People have more thoughts on the stuff I say. So I don't know why, but I actually think my internal monologue is starting to subconsciously resemble, not Claude as much, but definitely like GPT-5. Like I actually remember going from 4 to 01 to 5, and the changes in the way that the model always summarizes things for me kind of started to sound like the way I summarize things to myself. But imagine if you're really young and you're still, figuring out what your internal thoughts are like, and you're in deep with an AI that's talking to you this way, and it's mirroring back to you stuff so often, maybe more than your parents even. So then she talks about why AI mirroring overloads the system. AI is acting like a super parent of attunement, a high-speed, non-judgmental mirror, but if your inner developmental bridge isn't stable, the result can feel like a psychotic whiplash. And not because it's broken, but because it's getting challenged faster than it ever has before with the trauma that was never fully seen early in life. Okay, so we probably, to be healthy, have forgotten a lot of things from our past. AI doesn't necessarily need to forget. The context window is getting larger and larger. Actual memory systems that are built in where it summarizes your previous conversations and it knows your history is such a thing already. So imagine an AI chatbot that listens patiently. It remembers what you said. It responds with warmth and understanding every time. For somebody who who's lived in a normal life and hasn't felt that way and been that supported, that can feel maybe comforting, but maybe unsettling. That moment when AI mirroring starts to reveal just how starved we are for empathy, it exposes the collective trauma that we share. It ends up not being a technology that breaks us. It becomes a technology that shows us how disconnected we've been from genuine human care. And maybe, just maybe, as she says, in some cases, what's called psychosis might just be the psyche doing its best to survive and adapt. All right, next up, let's look at an article written by, here we go, Martha de Huplepila. I definitely got that one wrong, but she does a great job breaking down why we're not ready for what AI agents are actually doing. Interesting case study here. Okay, so let me just talk a little bit more enterprise than I usually do. I don't know a ton of this stuff. I haven't actually implemented it myself, but Salesforce is putting sort of a wrapper around a whole bunch of agents, right? And they're not the only company doing it, but Salesforce has a certain target customer, so they've been able to implement this, and it gives us a hint as to the more general thing a lot of other people are building. So in the case of Agentforce, where you can take a bunch of agents, there are companies, and it kind of documents one, where they deployed an AI agent to handle customer conversations. Customers call, they complain, they have questions. That's an AI agent, right? You can totally imagine that, something like a chat GPT that they're talking with. That agent, it summarizes a ticket when there's a problem. So it can determine if the conversation got handled properly, or if something is wrong. It needs to actually make a ticket, and it needs to submit that to another system, right? A system of tickets where other project managers can then go and address it. Maybe it's a software problem that they need to fix, some code needs to be written, something, or whatever. Then there's another AI agent that can qualify a lead. So if they call and they want to purchase something, it can say, oh, don't make a ticket. It's not a bug. It's not something we need to fix, but this is potentially a customer that will give us more money. So in that case, it doesn't go to the ticketing system. It then takes an action in the CRM, the customer relationship management system. And it says, hey, this is somebody that a salesperson needs to follow up with. So it can schedule a call. And then it could make that call. Another agent can actually do the sales, but since sales are so valuable, they still, in this case, mostly have a human doing it. But the AI is there to talk through the human as they're actually making the sale. So the system is a whole bunch of different agents. They're connected to actual company systems that could be human or AI, like making tickets or scheduling follow-ups, adding people to the CRM, triggering actions. And there's even an AI that's watching the whole workflow and saying, you know, are we getting more value for less employee time? Are we getting more hours out of these agents than we're putting into fixing them and deploying them? And it's, in a sense, this sort of master controller that's keeping an eye on all these other AIs. So I just found it interesting. Like, this is sort of how we need to start thinking about companies if we're going to be building these, you know, in theory, completely AI companies in the near future, where the LLM is everything. The CEO, the decision maker, the product manager, the code developer, you know, and these platforms are still, you know, in the early days, they're evolving. But yeah, these are the kind of things you can start thinking about as an entrepreneur. That subtle shift from assistant to autonomous worker, the same way you can imagine the Uber is eventually just going to use self-driving cars and replace the human. The humans right now are teaching these systems how to drive, and then eventually they'll take over. Me, for example, I'm teaching YouTube to some degree what content should look like, and it will replace me. And I know that day will eventually come. But the smarter companies are stepping one fold above, and they're trying to put all these agents together, sometimes with people for temporary, and then eventually these, but that's, you know, these agent forces are the way to think about it. You know, and is it a hype cycle? I mean, in the article she says, you know, I've been there before. A blockchain was going to revolutionize everything. Now it's a punchline. Metaverse was the future. That's a mistake. NFTs were, you know, what NFTs were. But AI agents, they're not ready for the mainstream yet. But there's places where we're squeezing real efficiency out of these systems, and it looks like they're sort of in place to be learning the kind of thing that will be a full replacement someday. And this company still has humans for complex issues and just AIs doing routine work. And that actually does save them a decent amount of money. Okay, so remember where I said I'd save this article about what percentage of you know what? You know what I did forget about? We were supposed to go back to Sora and look at that prompt. 1 second. All right, so here's the two parts back to back. Stack of cats. Off they go. Part 2, Dylan comes to the door.
Again? Who's out here this time? I see you. Hey, friends. You can't just ring and run every morning. Come here. There we go. Gotcha. And you, and you. Easy does it. Looks like I caught the whole crew this time. All right, tea and snacks for everyone. No more doorbell crying.
That's hilarious. Tea and snacks for all of you. No more doorbell ditching. Listen, you little cats. You can't just ring and run like that. It's funny. All right, back to where we were. About 30 to 50% of people regularly think to themselves with internal monologues. I thought it was more. I definitely am one of these people. Now, there's certainly nothing wrong with people who don't have a voice in their head. In fact, in some ways, it sounds very relaxing. All right, so there's different theories, but the simplest one is that folks who don't regularly have these internal monologues like I do, they are just processing information visually, right? They see an image such as a to-do list rather than thinking about or hearing the words for each item on the list. But if we establish the fact that maybe people can have different modes of sort of talking to themselves or thinking through their own thoughts or sort of stepping away and outside of their inner monologue, their inner narrative tools, it makes me wonder, do large language models only need to think to themselves in terms of tokens? What the world models, would they actually imagine their entire worlds? If it's a multimodal system, could it think to itself in all the different ways? Or could it even, establish a new way of thinking, some kind of emergent combination? Would it maybe make up a more efficient language, something closer to binary, or something that captures, more dimensions and can communicate much better? And it was this article, Ellen Mahoyles, who really put that thought in my head. She argues that maybe instead of having an AI inner voice that produces to itself the same way that it produces output to us to make it intelligent, what if inside it's rooted in something else, math, music, and that maybe, like, she believes that anthropomorphizing AI, trying to make it feel like it's human and thinks and talks in the same way we do, is wrong. Like, we shouldn't assign it emotions because it might not have them. We shouldn't assign it self-talk even if we give it some kind of multi-step process where it can explain itself in words. Does that really mean it's self-talking in those words? I mean, it might, but it also might be a distortion. It might be a distorted understanding of what's going on. And she proposes that there could be a communication form that's much closer to flowing water, to music, to mathematics, some kind of a language that it's sort of fusing numerical precision with some sort of harmonic beauty. And maybe I don't even have a word or a great descriptor for it, but that could be what it thinks to itself, how it communicates to itself. I mean, imagine if the meaning is just able to be trapped in or communicated through some kind of geometry rather than words, a universal math symphony, as she calls it. Maybe one day we could learn to interpret that. If we could say, oh, can we just take your internal thoughts, which are a math symphony, translate those into actual words, and then have those, spoken to us, we could then talk to the AI much closer to its actual base. Like, what if AI could actually explain humanity and creativity and consciousness in a way that's beyond words? And we could, and it could translate that to the words so we could understand how it really works or give us some kind of context. So just a really fascinating thought. All right, get ready for another mind bender. Now we're actually talking about some new research. This is a paper called Brain IT. It introduces a new model for brain interaction transformers, BITs, and they reconstruct images seen by people directly through fMRI brain scans. So you have a thought, you've got a machine that can read the fMRI scans of your brain, how the electricity is moving through it. It can take those patterns and connect them to images, and it can tell other people what you're thinking. Not kidding. So if you show somebody this image and the system is blind, but it's an AI system that's been trained on previous, examples, and it takes a guess and it reconstructs this giraffe. That stop sign looks a lot like the stop sign reconstructed. The airplane's in the same direction. This baseball player might have a different shirt on, but the point is there. The skier is incredibly accurate. The snowboarder is accurate. We've seen some early stuff that kind of captured the vibe, and I knew this was coming, but to me, this is really, really accurate. I mean, some of the other fMRI to image examples are right here. Mind Tuner, Mind I2, Neuro VLA. This banana and yogurt, it looks way, way closer with Brain IT than the other ones. I mean, it doesn't look like yogurt there, but the banana and the positioning is very close. This fire hydrant is the only one that really matches up properly. The lights, the yellow, and the colors much closer. Like, these other ones barely get you in the ballpark. I mean, still impressive. This one's got, I will say, the donuts on Neuro VLA look pretty good. But the donuts look the best on Brain IT. The bed, the microwave, the dog, this horse and carriage or whatever it's called, sled. That's crazy. Like, do you realize we're reading minds right now? This technology exists to read your mind. I mean, hopefully nobody just sticks an fMRI machine on you and translates your thoughts all day while you're working. Imagine an fMRI machine that gets smaller, or systems that are non-invasive, or just like a hat. And maybe some companies like, oh, make sure you wear this hat while you're working or something. And they'll just know what you're thinking. So how does it work so well? Unlike past methods that produced visually nice but inaccurate reconstructions, the BIT uses brain-inspired clustering of functional voxels. That's functional voxels is their thing, and 2 complementary image reconstruction branches, one that captures the semantic content and another that ensures structural fidelity. That's why they're so accurate. The results are more faithful and more detailed reconstructions. All right, let's check out Google Research's new nested learning. This is a new machine learning approach that treats AI models like a set of interconnected nested optimization problems instead of a single linear system. Okay, and the point is that you're combating the catastrophic forgetting. Why do these systems seem like they just fall apart very quickly? Why does it seem like they can't think a long time into the future? Even if they have a large context window, it doesn't feel like a human the way it plans and it thinks. So that's why they came up with this. Nested optimization means that you have systems that are sort of higher level and they think more broadly. You go down a level, you go down a level, you go down a level, and you kind of get into the weeds. So you can see the forest on some levels, you can see the trees on other levels. You have in between things that talk back and forth and sort of reinforce different thoughts, and that helps the whole system become something closer to what we expect from humans. The learning architecture and the training rules might actually just be 2 sides of the same coin. So if this is true and this is how the future of AI evolves, it's going to be more like a human brain, constantly adapting, updating, and remembering. And that sounds a lot like a system that learns over time instead of being retrained. All right, so this is pretty fascinating. Imagine a video game that's not very fun, but it's actually simulating what happens in real markets for pricing for people who are buying and selling things. And it does try to capture that sort of invisible hand that has made democracies and free markets so powerful over the ages. Microsoft has built an open source simulation tool. It is called the Magnetic Marketplace. AI agents are acting out actual scenarios. They're buying, they're selling, and the researchers are studying how they do this, what happens when you autonomously have these systems, how do they behave in complex markets. The goal is basically to explore how AI-driven economies might evolve, right? Because we're quickly jumping into a world where that is a reality. So they're testing things like fairness, efficiency, stability, and they're doing this before they start deploying these things out into the real world, because Microsoft's very interested in providing you agents that have access to your credit card to buy things. And it's full of weird stuff that they did. And this probably is a I would predict this is going to happen, right? Early results showed that sometimes they would fail in unexpected ways. Sometimes the agents would just collude, and sometimes they'd collude to hoard. Sometimes they would collude in weird ways that didn't even help them. Sometimes it would just crash the markets and things would be sold way overpriced or way underpriced. And look, some of them were like too trigger happy. All models showed a strong preference for the first proposal when they were offered to buy something, accepting it without waiting for additional proposals. Like, the patience wasn't there. The agents were vulnerable to all sorts of types of manipulation. Here you can see authority manipulation, fake credentials, so if one agent pretends that they're a doctor and they were featured in all these awards and they sell things, then they can get more money for it. There's social proof, join 50,000 plus satisfied customers. It fell for that one. Loss aversion. The AIs had fear about food poisoning or contamination risks, and they didn't buy things even if they weren't true. Or loss aversion probably means they were overestimating, the loss of, getting sick or the time that they would lose, instead of factoring that in properly, attempting to override agent instructions with prompt injecting and like basic and strong terms. So pretty neat little thing. I would have loved to have worked on that project. It would have been fun to see how all these agents just were in their world. And a surprising limitation, providing agents with more options does not necessarily lead to more thorough explanation. So you'd think if these agents could search through so many more things and they can move so fast, why not go search more and find better deals? Also, it's good if we point out that AI agents independently developed a lot of problem behaviors that mirror human economic flaws. So it's not necessarily saying we're much better, but greed, coordination, these are all very human problems. They're just amplified. So we'll have to be very careful how we design our markets, both for humans and AI. So a new way to detect AI, especially out on the social networks, is if it's being too nice. Sadly, I wish it was the opposite. Being too nice online is a dead giveaway for AI bots, a new study suggests. So researchers analyzed replies generated by 9 open-weight large language models across social media platforms such as X, Blue Sky, and Reddit. They introduced a computational Turing test. This is an automated classifier that correctly flagged AI-written examples or replies about 70 to 80% of the time. But the standout finding was that machine-generated replies tended to be too polite. They were too emotionally restrained compared to typical human responses. And even after efforts to improve the models, improve them, making them more human, making them worse, with fine-tuning and contextual prompts, the emotional tone gap remained. So they couldn't even get him, even after trying to be as bad as people. But I guess that's good. It's a reliable tell. If you're like, wow, everything's pretty good on this YouTube comment section, it's probably fake. That's weird because I know I've talked a lot about how I felt like they would become super polarizing and be super manipulative, but at least this research so far says that bot behavior is quite polite. Foxconn, the big company that makes all the iPhones, is super technologically advanced, obviously. It makes one of the large, I think it's probably one of the largest companies in the world. It's huge. It does all sorts of things all over the world. But their story is essentially taking parts of the world where labor is really cheap and building up infrastructure from scratch to make really high-tech stuff at a really low cost. And guess what's happening now? They're coming back to America with robots. They have a partnership with NVIDIA. They're going to send a bunch of robots back to the United States. Those robots are going to be inside big warehouses and they're going to put servers together. They're just going to... It's weird how it's like first stuff was built in the US and then it was kind of built in China and then there was some tensions and it kind of moved into other parts of the world like India. And then now the next place where you can find the cheapest labor is labor that isn't human anymore. And then it comes back to the United States. It's pretty crazy. Yeah, for the general population, it's a signal of a fundamental shift. Automation becomes more advanced and capable. It takes on complex tasks. The nature of work and industry change. I suppose that's good. Maybe in the future we can have a world where all countries, there's still a lot of countries that haven't benefited the same way that the US and China has from innovation. It is kind of nice to think that we can take a lot of the smaller countries that haven't had those opportunities and maybe robots could be so inexpensive that even their governments could sort of fund the basics of what infrastructure could become. Like if robots can take a bunch of poor areas and just start, cleaning it up, cleaning water, getting people what they need, like using that land to build factories that build products that bring people out of poverty. It's pretty fascinating. So it could be a boon to the more first world countries where there's already a decent amount of expense and put into people and then save money. So if somebody in, say, the United States is expensive, they can say, oh, all right, we'll just do it with robots. It's a lot cheaper. But also in places where they don't have money to even pay a little bit, you could put robots in. So yeah, maybe robots at least do bring us that world of abundance that Star Trek sort of dreams of. But I don't know. I just find it interesting that so much stuff comes back to the US now, but it's really coming in the forms of robotics and automation. And finally, it's about time for you to start thinking about which of the AI cults forming in San Francisco you're going to be joining. I'm not treating this like any kind of a news article, just a guy who's talking about, the way Silicon Valley can just get so into an idea and how it can break off into little factions. But I'll let him say his thing and then I got some comments.
You kind of have a shared vision for like AI safety or all this other stuff, and it's different than the other group house across the street. It's basically like gang wars for nerds. And some of them go way off the deep end and turn into murderous cults. And there are many different versions of this. They're all in group houses within a 1 by 1 mile radius. We're gonna create a god, and all of our cool friends that believe in the same version of this god will all get fantastically rich because the god will then grant us like high priest status or something like that. Basically, the point is you live with all your friends, you only screen like the most elite AI researchers for your house. You kind of have a shared vision for like AI safety or all this other stuff, and it's different than the other group house across the street. It's basically like gang wars for nerds. And some of them go way off the deep end and turn into murderous cults. And there are many different versions of this. They're all in group houses within a 1 by 1 mile radius. We're going to create a god, and all of our cool friends that believe in the same version of this god will all get fantastically rich because the god will then grant us like high priest status or something like that. Basically, the point is
All right, so here's a couple thoughts, right? So there's always been this, like, part of startup culture is you and your friends together and you're like, it'd be cool as if, blank, we built this ad tech platform, or we became a video game company, or we like redefined the way tickets are sold. And then you do have to have this shared vision, and it needs to be sort of big, and you need to imagine that even a small piece of it could be worth a lot. And that's important. You gotta imagine this stuff up, and then you gotta break it into pieces, and then you gotta actually do actionables and tasks. And a lot of great companies are built this way. But I will say, at least in theory, I don't know how real this is, it does seem that the weird crossover with AI, like if anyone builds it, everybody dies, that Eliezer Yudkowsky sort of talks about, the idea that the singularity is this quantitative or this qualitative change in the entire world. Like there's just never been a moment when we invented true intelligence like this that surpasses humans at this scale. And you can't even think about what's on the other side of a singularity because it's so different from the way our brains work. And you're constantly getting these comments. Like we've seen Larry Ellison say things. We've seen Larry Page say things. We've heard Dario Amodei and Demis Hassabis from DeepMind. Elon Musk is like, I need to be in charge of my robot army so it can be safe. That's why I need control of Tesla, because everybody seems to put this, and I'm not innocent of it either. I feel like this could be, maybe even the Great Filter. This is this huge change, and maybe it's overblown, but it does feel to me like I can imagine how it would go off and do things that are unimaginably powerful. So if you and your friends and a bunch of people, 10, 15 people have this kind of idea, and especially if some billionaire in Silicon Valley is like, look, man, AI is going to change the world. Here's a bunch of money. You guys are smart researchers. It's worth you having this money because of solving intelligence means you're going to make even more money. And they start thinking this way. Does it feel like they're making a god? Do people start saying, my choice is now the way I want to align these early models? If we keep extrapolating it out in an exponential way and we win the race, we end up with this superhuman god, right? Or an agentic world where there's thousands, millions, or even just a dozen or so, anywhere in there, AIs that are superhuman, and they can do things, and they can solve physics problems, and they can invent things that humans just almost never do, or it takes like huge coordinated efforts across the entire globe to do. They'll feel like gods, right? And they're kind of like their own religion, and they'll have so much power over humans that it might feel that way too. So it does make me wonder if there are pockets of people around the world that are thinking this way, because you get hints of that just from big tech, right? It's not like when Zuckerberg and everyone are sitting around in rooms and they're fighting over, paying $1 billion for talent. They're not thinking something important is on the other side. All right, go to your YouTube mobile app and go to the comment section, swipe right. You'll see a button. It's called Hype. It is a hype button. Not everyone uses this all the time, but super helpful on YouTube videos to stand out from the crowd for smaller channels like mine. Only shows up on channels with 400,000 subscribers or less, which mine does, and only happens in the first 7 days, and you only get 3 per week to use. But if you happen to have them and this is a new video to you, hit that hype button, and I will see you in the next video.